Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining in from today. Welcome to another live session at the Reactor. My name is Rav and I'm the program manager here at Reactor London. Before we get into the session, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We're all here to learn, so please be respectful, please be kind, ask a lot of good questions, and the chat will be open. So I'll leave this for a couple of seconds for you to read. So today we have a very exciting series we're starting off with Johan. It's called A Beginner's Guide to AI, and today is episode 1. So we'll have another episode next week, but then we'll be taking a little bit of break, which we'll obviously announce in the next episode. But for today's episode 1, we'll talk all about introduction to AI on Azure. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Johan. Hi, Johan.
Hey, Rav, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Right, good morning or afternoon, or wherever you are, whatever the time zone you're in, and whatever time your time is right now. Welcome to our session, Introduction to Azure AI. You might have been on a couple of introductions to Azure AI for that matter. It's obviously become quite a big topic over the last year or so. More so with the launch of ChatGPT towards the end of last year. AI kind of took the world by storm, and yeah, we're planning to expand a bit on your learning and expertise around this. My name is Johan Meiberg. I'm a Microsoft technical trainer with the Microsoft Worldwide Learning Department here in the UK. You might hear from my accent that I'm not originally from the UK. I'm from South Africa, but I'm very fortunate and happy to be working with the folks from the Reactor here in over at Microsoft to be teaching and sharing skills and sharing knowledge to our wider communities. So I'm going to get straight into our agenda. We'll first, as you might expect, just have a little bit of why AI. And then we will talk about responsible AI, which is actually critical in terms of developing your strategy around AI. Then we'll talk a little bit about AI infrastructure and what services are available inside of Azure for infrastructure. Infrastructure is also quite a big deal. Lots of projects fail because of infrastructure, and we'll talk about that. And then we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the session, which is essentially the Azure AI services. We've got available in Azure at a very high level, though. In future sessions, we will delve into a lot more detail here. And this will be machine learning and deep learning, pre-trained models, our cognitive services, really, and then Azure OpenAI. Bit of a summary towards the end there, and then we will share some links that will also be available on the chat in the next steps part of this conversation. Anyway, let's get straight into this. Why AI, right? And to give you an idea, oopsie, that was not what I expected. There's definitely a weird link there that I wasn't expecting. So Microsoft runs on Azure AI, and more than what you might actually expect, actually leverages AI. You can see there that from an edge perspective, 7.5 trillion characters are translated per month. 45 million meeting hours are transcribed per month from Teams, and 100 million monthly active users are using AI text predictions on our Microsoft Office platform. So the scale and the AI capabilities that Microsoft is leveraging is coming out of Azure and is available for you to leverage today. I've also got some other reasons why you might want to infuse AI into your applications and into your different systems. And you'll notice from this slide that there's a huge amount of vertical markets, so to say, that can benefit from AI, right? All the way from healthcare to sort of retail scenarios where you may be integrating with things like IoT type devices, fintech, where fraud detection, different patterns in your data and in your day-to-day sort of operations that your customers are engaging in, are very easy for us to recognize these patterns and to pass it over to an AI model and to understand. But this is something that's out of the pattern that the customer usually does. So again, just the point here is everyone and every business and every industry can use and infuse AI in their processes and in their different systems. And despite the fact that your maturity in this space might be quite low, Microsoft has got different AI components at all levels of the AI stack, which I'll get to in a bit, that allows you to leverage AI, right? So if you don't want to build AI into applications, you can leverage things like Copilot, Office 365 Copilot, that assists you in, generating text and these sort of things. Before we get into that, though, and into the actual content itself, I thought it was important just to mention the AI guiding principles that Microsoft is making available. So there is AI is busy changing the world. It's busy changing the way businesses operate, and it's busy optimizing and streamlining some processes that usually took quite a bit of time to do. Now, in doing this, sensitive information is often shared with the AI models. The patterns and the models that are coming out of the machine and deep learning components very often have information that borderlines on stepping on toes from a compliance perspective and from an overall governance perspective. Now, what you want to ensure is that you stick to some sort of a planning guide and model that ensures that your AI processes and AI integration, doesn't get you into some sort of a situation where you are not compliant, or where, in a worst case scenario, there's some sort of a litigation going on. And to this, Microsoft has developed, the responsible AI guiding principles, and these guiding principles really talk to all sort of aspects that you might expect that might come out of your AI scenario. If you think of things like fairness, for example, right, where you really want to ensure that if you are, building an AI model, that, we are not biased towards certain, age groups, for example, right? These sort of things. On top of this, you want to ensure that you're not only sort of fair, but you're also as inclusive as you can be, and that inclusiveness is catered for as part of your model and part of your AI plan. In a worst case scenario, you don't want folks to think that you are doing something and actually behind the scenes you are doing something different. So privacy and security, transparency that underpins most of these is crucial to doing this. Why is this important, and why am I talking about this? Because generally, AI is not being guided by governments today. AI is currently being guided by the organizations that build these frameworks and platforms, like Microsoft, for example, and by the companies that implement these different systems and tooling around this. And this basically leaves your responsibility with your organization, and essentially largely with your development teams, to ensure that things are compliant and things operate in a specific way. And if there is some sort of an issue, that there is accountability that comes out of this. So there isn't any high-level guidance from a government perspective at this point in time, which leaves it up to the individual organization to do. And my suggestion would be that you look at, the responsible AI guiding principles that Microsoft has published before you start leveraging and engaging in building solutions that have some of these capabilities. It's really the approach should be to be proactive rather than reactive, right? Transparency. If someone walks past a video camera, right, they should know that they're being recorded. They should know that we're doing facial recognition. You don't want these things to come out in a way that actually reflects badly on your organization and on your team. So that's essentially the responsible AI component, and I can actually not stress that enough, right? I'll share some links towards the end of this session, that will allow you to actually to go and I believe it will also be on the chat that you can actually go and explore some of these in a bit more detail. If you're planning to write certification exams around this from the Microsoft certification stack, almost all of our AI certifications have got questions, surrounding, responsible AI. So it's probably worth knowing some of these things. But then again, if you start developing AI solutions and embedding these types of capabilities in your services and applications, it's challenging. And the main reason it's challenging is that, as you can see towards the bottom there, the IDC research has shown that consistently the biggest problem, of projects around AI failing is a lack of purpose-built infrastructure. The key issue here is we've got a set of developers and one or two teams of developers, and where the developer today was maybe building something like an MVC type application where they were, just generating some HTML and JavaScript, maybe some C# server-side if you're using the .NET framework, maybe some Node.js code, whatever the case is, stuff that generally our development environments are, well equipped with to actually deal with those workloads. But the minute you start building AI models, especially complex models, that developer stack typically might not work as well as you might expect with a scenario. So the developer is building MVC apps today. Tomorrow they're asked to build a massive, generative text model or something like this that requires really a whole different set of underpinning sort of resources and hardware. So what you could do is you could leverage the Azure and Microsoft and Azure purpose-built infrastructure in the cloud to streamline some of that operations for you, to streamline things like collaboration, to enable integration with your standard sort of development stack and other types of services. All right. And you'll notice here that we support a complete operational life cycle for your machine learning and those types of models, very similar to what other partners of us are doing today. And you will see that under other innovators in this space like OpenAI, NVIDIA, Inflection, and a host of others are actually leveraging the infrastructure in Azure to be able to build out some of their capabilities. The infrastructure in Azure is purpose built for this sort of tasks and processing, right? So we bring to you GPU-based architectures where we've got parallel workloads that are running and executing on purpose-built GPUs that give you a huge amount of processing capability on top of the standard sort of CPU model that we're used to using today. So so as opposed to provisioning virtual machines that just have a huge amount of RAM and CPU, you ideally want to deploy and run your models and build your models on infrastructure that can cater for that load, right? That's got this sort of capability under the hood and addresses those sort of hardware, very specific hardware needs. We've got again across the range here, anything from sort of entry level to mid range to real high range parallel processing scenarios that you can enable, and all of this, of course, comes with the standard sort of capabilities that you get from Microsoft Azure data centers, right? Globally distributed, redundant, integrated, and full on enabled with backup and recovery capabilities, compliance, right, built in at the very core. So all of these things is is going to assist you in getting to that endpoint a lot quicker and with much more purpose than your development infrastructure that might be, a developer laptop today. And this brings me into the deep learning conversation, right? So as you can remember at the beginning when I mentioned in the slide, the introduction, the lowest common denominator of your AI set of services in Azure will be to be able to generate your own models, right? And for this, Microsoft has got some machine learning capabilities. We'll give you a demo of this in a minute, but we've got an Azure Machine Learning Studio that allows you to spin up your infrastructure, run and deploy even some of these models, and use some of those best-in-class open source frameworks that you might be using today on premises, right? So think of things like TensorFlow, PyTorch, these sort of things. Tooling that's very specific to working with large chunks of data that is kind of just integrated at the very core of these services. So in Azure, the machine learning stack is going to allow you to develop with your choice of tools. Think of everything from drag and drop type designers to Jupyter notebooks, all the way through to automated machine learning that supports your software development lifecycle in the space. And I'll talk in a little bit more detail around that. Create and deploy these models at scale, and then and keep innovating, right? So taking some of that load off your developer and allowing the developer to focus on what they need to do to get the job done. And again, all sorts of frameworks to this end. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly just give you an example of this. So what I've done here is I've got the Azure portal, as you can probably see. I'm going to just bump the font slightly. The font's a bit small. And you can see there that I created a new machine learning space. Just check my time here. I can actually go and create a new machine learning space if I wanted to, and you'll see it's just prompting me for some very sort of stock standard fields here. It's prompting me for a name. It's prompting me for a storage account. It's prompting me for a key vault where I might secure some of those keys and secrets that I might be using in my application. It's got an integrated application insights instance that it creates for you, which will allow you to start instrumenting your applications and endpoints that you've published. And it also includes a container registry where you might be hosting and storing some container images that you might be using for some of these services. Out of this, you will get a machine learning workspace, and the workspace itself doesn't show a lot here in the Azure portal. But if I click through on the studio URL, it's going to take me through to the machine learning studio, and in the machine learning studio, you will see a whole range of different tools and other types of assets. You can see that we've got some automated machine learning components. We will touch a little bit on this in the next session. We've got a designer for designing the different flows that you might use to generate one of these models, import your data, etc. It's got the option to point to data and bring and onboard some additional data by surfacing some of this data in the storage account where it's accessible to the workspace. And then we've got jobs and other types of components that is essentially going to allow us to build out some of these models. I'm going to click through on the designer here, and you'll notice that I can go and create a new pipeline if I wanted to, but I've actually got a couple already. There you can see there's a specific regression pipeline where I essentially start by drawing in some data, specifying what data and columns I want to be using, clean up some of the missing data. If I, for example, am starting with a CSV file and some of the columns don't have values, empty values, we can actually start telling this designer how we want to actually treat those missing fields, right? Do we want to, if it was a salary type, a salary or a price type column where there's missing information, we might just go for the average or the mean based on what the other data fields are. And then, we want to kind of split the data into a training set and then into a test set. So you'll notice on the left-hand side there's a whole bunch of different components and other types of activities that I can pull into my model here that allows me to reference some additional reference data, for example, and do some other data transformation type tasks. And then I'm going to be training the model. You'll see that once we've trained the model, we can go and score the model, we can evaluate the model. This is an extremely simple one that I created. In fact, this is actually one of the templates that just pop out of the box if I went to the designer and just clicked on this regression option. But you'll see that there's a whole bunch of other options, right? Binary classification, for example, right? Click through on one of these, and it's going to show me, an additional, flow and pipeline that's effectively going to execute Python scripts to actually generate a model. Once I've generated this model, I can then essentially, publish this model, as a type of endpoint, and that endpoint will then be able to programmatically be accessed and return some of the information that you might want out of this model. Like, for example, passing it some data as to what would the average salary be if these are the types of parameters that we really require. You'll also notice that I've got some data options here, and I can go and add some additional data sets. I can point it to a whole host of different data stores, right? You can see there's Azure Blob Storage, there's Azure Data Lake Storage, Gen 1 and Gen 2. I can also point it to Azure SQL Database, Postgre, MySQL data stores, file shares, etc. inside of Azure. So the data that drives this model of yours that you're going to be training on could come from a variety of different sources. I'll just leave that in place. And then, of course, you might notice that, there's going to be, once you've run one of these, there's going to be some jobs. One of the key components here is the compute component, right? So if I have my machine learning studio, the machine learning studio is really just a shell with some data attached that doesn't, out of the box as it is, as you can see here, have the capability of doing any compute, right? So the first thing you typically do is you go and you create a compute component, and you'll see that in the compute component, we've got standard compute instances, which might be a single instance. We've got compute clusters, which is more like a cluster of servers. We've got Kubernetes clusters, and we can also go and attach additional compute components. So if I click on Kubernetes clusters, for example, I can go and create a new Kubernetes cluster. Let's create this one as the reactor, for example. I can go and specify a Kubernetes cluster, and I can deploy these workloads over those existing clusters. Just from a compute cluster capability, you will see that I can specify whether it's going to be a dedicated low priority type scenario, whether I require GPU type capabilities, and you can see there's a couple of NVIDIA GPUs involved. I can go and select from any one of these. And this is why we are saying that the infrastructure that's available for you inside of Azure is purpose-built for running some of these types of workloads and tasks. And this is way different from having some or other laptop that or machine that your developer has been building MVC or other types of web applications in the past. The requirement is different, which essentially forces you to think, well, do we want to continue with our existing infrastructure, which can probably take you 80 or 20 or sort of 90% of the way, but you might just need some additional capability, right? And the idea really is to partner with someone like Microsoft in our Azure space and get that compute capability that you might require. You'll notice that I've already got a compute instance here, and this compute instance, you'll notice that it's not started, but I can also start it. It's automatically going to shut down after it's been idle for a certain amount of time, and I can configure this so that your cost stays as low as possible, right? You want to ensure that you are not, that your typical sprawl that you might find in the cloud is not based on some of these types of hardware specs. Like as you can see, they're 4 cores, 14 gigs of RAM. Some of these items are not cheap, especially if you start throwing in GPUs. So you do want to implement that strategy of saying, well, we don't want this thing to be running when we don't actually need it. You can see there's your cost as well. So you'll create the compute, and once you've got the compute and once you've got your model, you can then essentially go and specify that you want to configure and submit this. You can go and create a new experiment out of this. I'm just going to give it a blind name here, and then you'll notice I can specify some inputs and outputs. I can specify my compute cluster and instances that I'm going to be using for this, and I'll then be able to actually submit that job on that infrastructure that I created. So this machine learning studio that I'm talking about here and that I'm showing you now really contains all the components that you need to build and train your models, but also run additional scripts and other tasks and automate some of the components that you will need to do this at a high level with huge chunks of data, integration into storage accounts, etc., etc. We're going to run that now. I will show you a job that's already ran, and you will see that there's a job that ran. This job there has actually failed, and you can see that there's a job that actually executed successfully. And then based on the outcome of this, I might actually go and deploy this model to a specific endpoint. Popping back onto the slides again, I think again it's important that we're on the same page with regards to this process. You might be familiar with DevOps, right? But in the machine learning space, you want to follow some of those best practices from DevOps, and this might imply that you're using source control that's deployed centrally on something like GitHub, that you're building your app and your pipelines using standard sort of CI/CD processes and best practices, testing testing and validating these models, and then deploying them where you end up monitoring some of these models. I apologize for the slide going completely nuts with the animation, but there you can see. Another thing that's important is in this process is when things change and when data change and when components change, right, that you end up retraining these models. And we can go and specify from an event perspective and say that under these conditions, for example, when our data has changed, we want to trigger the pipeline again, bringing that latest data in and retrain the model and redeploy that model so that our application can start consuming this information. So this process is well documented. I don't think I've got a link on this now, but if you do a search for machine learning operations or ML ops on the Microsoft Learn website, you will see that there's a bunch of learning paths that will expand a little bit on this and give you some additional information and details. So that is kind of at the lowest level, right, of the AI stack, right? At its very core, AI is about building models. And the Azure Machine Learning Service is going to help you to build those models with data. Machine learning in its own is, possibly going to be using, a small subset of data. If you've got huge chunks of data and big data sets, we will typically refer to that as more of a deep learning type exercise and require possibly some additional compute capabilities. But again, we can cater for all of that with our machine learning stack. Moving a little bit away from the machine learning side, where we generate models, Microsoft actually has a bunch of existing models in place, right? So if you don't have the data to train the model, you can decide, well, what we want to do is we just want to leverage some of these components that have already been exposed as a model, right? And you can still train these components with custom data, but the reality is Microsoft Cognitive Services has probably got most of what you might require from an AI perspective already baked into these different services. So think of things like vision services, right? Where you might have a camera or a video camera that's wanting to identify, faces, for example, specify how many faces are there and show the location of these faces in a specific, image. Speech APIs, right? Speech to text, text to speech, translation services, where I can feed in a single language, and the speech service will come back and translate that into 5 or 6 different languages for me. All of these capabilities are ready for you just to switch on and start passing your data into them, and you don't have to go and train anything with custom data that we spoke about early on with the machine learning service. And then from a language understanding perspective, making sense of what someone is either saying or what someone is typing, and deciding from that, maybe using something like a bot to understand. But hang on, under these conditions, we think that the customer or the user is trying to ask us about this, and then supplying the customer with a custom answer that was generated based on what information that the customer or the user asked for. Text analytics, also some translation services also baked into that. And then on the far right hand side, you'll see custom decision making, where we've got things like anomaly detection, these sort of things, where we might work with a subset of data and understand, but this is an outlier in terms of the amount of data that we've got to date. So these are all these cognitive services are services that are available that you can essentially just switch on in Azure, and you can probably see this more as a platform as a service type scenario, where the machine learning side of things is probably more of an infrastructure as a service type component, if you want to categorize it like that. I've also got some demos of this. I can show 1 or 2 demos just off the bat. So what I did is I actually, if you search in the portal for Azure AI Services, you will see that, I can actually go and build out some of these individual services, or I can go and just create a service of kind cognitive services. And that is essentially going to include all of these services I spoke about. There you can see the Face API, for example. I can either create individual services like the Face API, the speech service, the language service, or I can go and create a cognitive services resource, which will include all those capabilities, but that doesn't have a free tier that you might want to be working with. Right? And you can see from this cognitive services component, you can see that there's an endpoint, and this is essentially the programmatic endpoint that you'll be sending your REST data to. And out of that, you will see that there's some keys, and these are effectively the keys that I'll be passing in to be able to authenticate and authorize the use of the API. Once this API has been, once the service has been deployed, you'll be able to to actually integrate with this service using a whole range of different, all the APIs that are available there. So if I go and search here for language service, just as an example, you can see there's Microsoft Cognitive Language Service. If I click through on this language service, you will see that I can actually go and look at the what the endpoint might look like, look at the request headers that might be sent through, and get an example of what some of the that data schema is that comes through there. I also don't think I've put this in the set of links towards the end, but you'll notice that that I can even go and test this using the API testing console, where I can specify the name of my service and the subscription key that I used and submit some of this data, and it's effectively going to return those results to me. So this service reference that I will see if I can put in the chat. I'm not sure if I can though, but I'll try. Maybe I can actually just join the chat. No, I can't. Anyway, I will. You can probably see the westus.dev.cognitiveservice.com. You might just search for Cognitive Services APIs and get to this link. And once you've created that service in Azure and you've got the endpoint and you've got the key, you can actually start testing some of those capabilities against those endpoints, right? Send some mock data, get the result, and see what that information will look like. Again, after this session, we will start in the next session. I think it's next Friday. We will look at machine learning and delve a little bit deeper into machine learning. And then after that, there's a third session that'll be coming up where we will delve a little bit deeper into these different cognitive services. We will have some more expansive demos and delve a little bit deeper into these topics. The last thing that we're going to be covering today, and again, this is just a very sort of high-level overview of all of this, is Azure OpenAI. And there's, we've been getting a lot of traction with regards to this because OpenAI is essentially, all the rage nowadays, as most of you might know. OpenAI essentially drives the ChatGPT, implementation, and most of that infrastructure actually runs inside of Azure, right? Now, on top of that, you can actually provision an OpenAI service inside of Azure. Once you've requested the permission to do that, we will enable this capability on your subscription. And once you've got the capability enabled, you will be able to start leveraging and exposing the API, the different open API models for you to actually interact with these services. Think of things like writing assistance, content and code generation, right? Image generation, just as an example. Crawl over structured and both unstructured data, right? Think of things like, Q&A summaries, text, feedback, different types of reports, chatbots, right? And virtual agent scenarios. All of these are scenarios that you can build on top of this open API infrastructure. Again, I've got a bit of a demo for this. So what I did was, let me just go back here. Here we go. If I go to my Azure AI Services area, you will see that Azure OpenAI is actually a part of this. We've got the last session in the series, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into Azure OpenAI, but you'll notice that I've already created one, and you can see it's over here. And in here, you'll notice that it's going to give me an endpoint, and if I click on keys, then it'll essentially also give me the keys that I can interact with this. Once I've generated this, I can actually go and deploy a model. You'll notice that that there's a whole bunch of different models available here, And if I click on deployments, I can create a new deployment and select the model that I want to be deploying. Once I've deployed this model, I can actually start testing this model by using the playground, as you can see on the top left here. And in the playground, we will be able to test the chat, look at things like completions, right? So what I did here is I deployed the ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo model, and from here I can start doing chats, right? I'm keen to learn about Azure machine learning. Where should I start? There we go. So using this Open API infrastructure of ours, and it's coming back to me saying, well, you really want to start with signing into an Azure account, navigating to the machine learning space in the portal, creating a workspace, etc., etc. I didn't have to train any models for this to happen. I just provisioned this environment, and this information is coming from the pre-trained models, right? So again, we are provisioning more like a platform as a service type component that you can programmatically interact with, and that you can also go and add your own data source if you wanted to, right? You can see there I can bring some additional data in here that will allow me to bring some additional data that will augment the existing trained model. You'll notice that we've also got completions here, and I've got an example here. When I go to make coffee, and that's all I typed, and I clicked on generate, and it actually stuffed all of this out and generated all of this out for me. That's what we mean by completions, whereby the model will look at what you're talking about and start giving you options as to how you can complete that sentence, just as an example. You'll also notice that I can click on generate again, and it will regenerate and I've got some control over that by specifying the frequencies and that sort of thing, and that will give us an idea of how much different each and every response needs to be. So you've got some parameters on the right hand side here that is effectively controls that allows you to specify, well, if I ask the same question over and over, how do I make sure that the model doesn't come back with the same answer over and over, right? Because that's not very human-like. So you got control over that. And then last but not least, I've also got this image generation scenario where I can say, generate an image of a dog in a blue cave. My word, I'm running out of ideas here. And you'll see that it's using this model to also generate. There you can see there's a model in the cave. If I hit the generate button again, it's going to come back with a different dog in a different cave, right? And again, I can configure that. I can configure these settings to specify how close do I want these images to be together and to look like the other images. Right, so just at a very high level, this is essentially the OpenAI studio that we've got that's available for the OpenAI models, and something that you can again just enable and switch on and start leveraging today in your custom applications. You also got there's as I mentioned, a list of the models. There's also some additional models you might be able to pull into this that you might have to ask permission to get. I know that we can use ChatGPT 4 already in here as well, but it's something that you have to request separately from this request. And then last but certainly not least in this space, we've also got some filters, right? So these filters allows me to create custom content filters that I can use to be quite specific in terms of what type of data I want to be generating. Of course, if you're building applications for the legal fraternity, you don't want answers to come back that relate to, just as an example, to the medical field, right? So we can go and hook up certain content filters to our different models to say, well, we are building a legal chatbot that only should be returning legal information, and to this end, we can filter some of the data that provides answers that are more specific to your scenario. And that was a very high level, quick lap around, the three main sort of services in Azure: the machine learning service, our cognitive services, and the Azure OpenAI service. And each of these will have a much deeper dive in the following sessions that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So if we can just summarize this, we've got domain-specific pre-trained models, which you can see there: the vision API, the speech, the language, the decision API, anomalies, these sort of things that we can pick out. You can also bring all of your, standard, data science tools that you're familiar with. Use something like Visual Studio Code, but also bring in your notebooks. Use command line tooling. Bring in all your Python models and frameworks that you are using today, like PyTorch, TensorFlow, Scikit, all of these things. And build on top of the existing infrastructure that we've got inside of Azure today, like the Machine Learning Studio, Azure Databricks, and other machine learning virtual machines and infrastructure and compute capabilities that we've got with those, those GPUs strapped up to them. And then last but not least, build on all of these and really bring value to your customers at the end of the day using some of these AI capabilities. And that was at a high level, the quick lap around the Azure AI services. I'm going to leave some time for a couple of questions, and then we will wrap things up. Finished a little bit earlier than I wanted to. Are there any questions, maybe Rav, that we can see?
Yeah. Yes. So there's a question from Peter. Will the slides be available for download at the end of the session? Is that something you'll be able to make public, Johan, or is that?
Absolutely. These slides will be available for consumption. I'm not sure where to put these slides, but yeah, absolutely. I can make these slides available. What I generally use is I use slideshare.net. So, I might be able to put them on slideshare.net. I'm not 100% sure what the best place will be to put them, but if you can
I think
maybe contact me
on GitHub.
But it's not proprietary information, so we can share the slides.
I think best place, Johan, would be GitHub or on your GitHub or on SlideShare, but we can chat about that offline.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Then next question we have is from Jawad. Would this series be helpful in preparing for exam AI 900?
Well, that's a good question, but the reality is probably not this session. But if you look at the sessions coming up, the next session will be focusing on machine learning. The session after that will be and there's a specific certification relating to machine learning, the DP100. So we will touch at a high level on that, but we're talking about a 4-day course that we usually train. So it's almost impossible to take an hour and stuff it full of information that's usually shared over a 4-day period, and sort of think that you can go and pass the exam. It'll probably help you a lot with the concepts though, and the concepts will help you to go and explore in addition to this. I can show some of this to you, but we do have some of these in the slides actually. If you just give me a moment. and these are in the chat. If you're keen on learning about these things, there you can see there's the machine learning, learning path. And if I'm going to click through on this quickly, you will see it'll take me through to the Microsoft Azure Data Scientist Associate certification. And if I scroll down towards the bottom here, you will see in Microsoft Learn, we've got all of this information available. So this is the self-paced study that you might actually go through and go and click on the start button, sign in so that the portal remembers where you left off, and you can hit the start button and you can start getting into the content, right? And click on continue. Next, there's a video maybe, etc., etc. Next, create the machine learning workspace. So we've got links towards the end of the session here that links out to machine learning, that links out to the AI 102 engineer, which is the cognitive services. And at the bottom there, you will also see AI solutions. And this is essentially going to link you to the AI 050 course, which is a course and collateral here is very specific to the Azure OpenAI service. So these sessions will help you definitely maybe from a conceptual perspective, but you might have to go and drill down and work through all of these, and you'll see that there's quite a bit related to this. I hope that answered the question there. So the answer is, yes, it'll help, but the real answer is it's not remotely enough to go and pass the exams.
Then we have a question from Prasanti. How to open this Azure account? It's paid, right? Of course.
Correct. Yes. So that's also a good question because not everyone has an Azure account, right? So if you do a search for free Azure account, then you will notice that you can create the free Azure account today, which will give you some credits, right? I think it'll start with 200 US dollars worth of credit. And once you've got this created, you can actually go and burn those credits on whatever service you want. Of course, if you go start a virtual machine and leave the virtual machine running, it's going to eat through those credits really, really quickly. But if you switch off your services and if you're mindful of the services you are provisioning and managing those instances, then you can get quite a bit out of this free account.
And I have a question from Cloud Therapist. Is it fair to say that this entire space is made up of 3 layers, the tech, the models, and then the presentation layer?
Yeah, so in all fairness, you can see it like that, but the reality is each of these layers that you are talking about, and I like the way you're thinking, but I do want to just quickly draw this out for you just to answer the question in a little bit more of a comprehensive fashion. So just give me a second. So yes, at the very bottom layer, we've got the machine learning services, which is going to allow you to create a model based on your custom data. On top of that, though, if you want to leverage existing APIs and models, and then from there, of course, publish an API. On top of this, we've got, not really. No, just leave me alone now, please. If you don't want to build and use machine learning to build your own model, you can use Cognitive Services, which comes with a bunch of pre-trained models, but also allows you to bring in some additional data to be more specific to your data scenarios, right? And then there's already existing APIs that you'll be leveraging, and if you and that is really the core of the 2 layers that there are. If you look at something like OpenAI, right? OpenAI will sit on some of this infrastructure, but will essentially also allow you to bring your own data, but it's comes with pre-baked models. So there are already also existing models, and of course you can bring your own data, but there's also just additional models. So I would actually say that OpenAI sits almost at the same level as cognitive services in this stack. So either you build your own models or you leverage some of the existing models that Microsoft has already built in the context of our cognitive services APIs, or using something like OpenAPI. I hope that answers the question, Cloud Therapist.
As part of handling compliance, is Microsoft taking care of the results returned from Azure AI image API generated images?
Hang on, friend. Just repeat that question. Let me just see where it is.
As part of the handling compliance, is Microsoft taking care of the results returned from Azure AI image API generated images? I wonder if there was a slash or.
Yeah, so as part of handling compliance, is Microsoft taking care of the results returned from the? I'm not 100% sure I understand. Are you talking about the storage of those images, or are you talking about those images being compliant with regulations? That's the part I'm not 100% sure I understand. Maybe you can just in the chat just delve a little bit deeper in that question. I'm not sure if I understand that really. Are you talking about where we store the images, or are you talking about the images that are generated? Because I don't think that we will necessarily store the images, but you can if you wanted to. In fact, you can probably in a way do whatever you want to do, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure what I mean. The copyright. Yeah, I'm also not 100% sure, what you mean by that. Are you asking if Microsoft retains the copyright, or if your company retains the copyright? It'll typically be your company that retains the copyright, not Microsoft.
Right. So Wesley asks where I can get the learning materials. I can answer that. So all resources will be available on the YouTube video, so under the description. And also, if you signed up through the Reactor website, you will get a thank you email, which will have all the resources as well. And then resources, Johan's just put these resources on his slide just now.
So these three links over here, individually, the top one, the AI 102, is is going to be linking to our cognitive services learning material. This one, MSFT machine learning -SD, is going to link to the machine learning material, and AI solutions -SD is going to link to the OpenAI material, which is essentially that course 050. So yeah, these will be available, and as Rav said, we will also make those available on the YouTube in the comments there.
Right. So, got another question. Let's say I want to build a LLM model which is trained on specific data, a kind of ChatGPT working only on a data set of employee info to recommend employees. How can I use Azure AI for this?
So it depends what you want to be doing, right? You can if you wanted to, you can build your own model using the machine learning studio and the machine learning infrastructure. So it just depends at what level you want to do this, right? What you can also do is you can also use our cognitive services, bring in some of your own custom data, and train the cognitive services APIs on what exactly your custom data is going to be at. Alternatively, if you're happy to use something like ChatGPT, you can also, something similar to ChatGPT, you can also use our OpenAI services. So it just depends what you want to be leveraging. Do you want to be leveraging the OpenAI engine? Are you happy to use the Microsoft Cognitive Services scenario, or do you really want to build this model using your own, modeling and machine learning capabilities? I guess it comes down to where your skills lie, right? If you've got some data science skills, you might use something like Python and the Machine Learning Studio and some of those building blocks to build a solution like that. But if you just have development experience and you just want to leverage an API, you can either use Cognitive Services or you can use our OpenAI services for something like that. So both of those will actually work for that. On top of this, and I don't think I've got a link for this right now. However, if you know our course code, right, and if you think about this, if I go search for Azure Machine Learning certification, just as an example, right, you will see if you scroll down a bit, then you will find, in fact, if I just go to learn.microsoft.com, let me just demo this quickly for you so you can see. If I go to certifications, and you will see that there's, for example, our administrator course, there's our DevOps engineer course. You will see from a developer perspective, there's going to be some developer courses. But if I scroll down here, at some point in time, I'm going to find the, let's say, for example, the let's look at, let me just get an example here. Let's look at AI engineer quickly. There you can see there's the exam AI 102. The reason why I'm showing this to you is if you know the course code, right, AI 02, you can actually go to the following short link, aka.ms/AI102 labs, right? So this is just using a very sort of standard approach, aka.ms/AZ, and this will actually be AI, by the way, not AZ, AI 102 labs. And this will actually take me through to a GitHub repo where you'll be able to actually practically, if you have an Azure subscription like that free subscription, work through some of these labs. There you can see enable resource providers, analyze text, and it'll then give you a complete sort of step-by-step instruction on how to programmatically interact with this API. And this is true for most of our courses. If I go aka.ms/dp100 labs, this is our machine learning course. There you can see provision a machine learning workspace, make data available, right? Work with compute resources, and it'll take you through all these things step by step. So the important thing is to go and find the certification you're keen on, remember what the certification name is, and just type aka.ms, the name of the code of the certification, AI 102, DP 100, whatever it is, it's available on a website, and add the word labs at the end, and that should take you through to the hands-on labs. And there you can get some practical hands-on experience on getting, working through some of these examples and demos that I actually am doing. All right, that is a good tip. I'm aware of that. It's very, 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 very valuable actually, right? Because this will take you step by step on how to work through an actual hands-on experience lab. And if you're anyway like I am, I learn by doing, not by listening as much. And if you learn by doing, use those hands-on labs to actually work through some of those scenarios. It's a big pleasure. Right. Well, I believe that we've
Yeah,
gone through most of the questions here.
yeah, we're out of time now, so I'm afraid all the other questions will have to be, we can probably answer them via email. So feel free to email us and then we can answer all those questions. But thank you very much, Johan, for your
No
time.
worries.
And we shall see you next week with another episode.
Yeah.
Until then, ciao, ciao. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.